Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Now let's start with the story. My name is Marco, and until a month ago, my life was a perfect canvas. At 33 years old, I had carved out a solid career as a civil engineer, climbing the ladder in one of the most prestigious companies in the capital. Each project was a challenge that filled me with pride. Each blueprint was a promise of a tangible and successful future. And best of all, I was weeks away from marrying Ivana, the love of my life, a 31-year-old woman who had been my partner, my confidant, my everything for the past 6 years. The date was set, the venue reserved, the menu tasted, and Ivana's dress a dream of lace and silk carefully stored in her closet. Everything was joy, planning the final details of a life that seemed ideal. But as a good engineer knows, even the most solid structure can have a crack in its foundations, invisible at first, but that over time threatens to bring everything crashing down. My weakness was always my brother Sebastian. Sebastian is 3 years younger than me, he's now 30. For as long as I can remember, living with him was a competition, not a brotherhood. It's not that my parents, Don Alejandro and Dona Elena, encouraged rivalry. On the contrary, they always tried to make us united, to love each other as brothers. But Sebastian's envy was a shadow that followed me everywhere, malice disguised as a game or a simple mistake. I remember the first major incident when I was 12 years old. I had spent months working on a robotics project for the school science fair. It was a small but complex robot programmed to overcome obstacles. I was obsessed with it. The night before the exhibition, I left it ready on my desk. Sebastian, who was then 9, entered my room. "I want to see it up close," he said, his voice casual. "I think it's fascinating." Naive, I gave him permission. The next morning, upon arriving at school, I discovered that my robot did not work. Its internal circuits were damaged, as if someone had tried to adjust something too forcefully. The teacher asked me, "Did you tamper with it, Marco?" I shook my head, confused and hurt. I looked at Sebastian, who was standing there with a hidden smile. He broke himself. "Marco," Sebastian said with an innocence that only a child could feign so well. The teacher looked at him, then at me, unsure what to believe. "You see, he was just playing with it." "It must have been an accident," Sebastian added quickly, eyes wide and innocent. But the teacher told me firmly, "I'm sorry, Marco, but you won't be able to exhibit it." My childish pride shattered like glass on the floor. At home, my parents tried to minimize the incident. "They're children's things, Marco," my mother said softly. "Sebastian didn't do it on purpose. It was surely an accident." That was the first time I felt the deep sting of betrayal, the awful realization that someone, especially my brother, could harm me on purpose. Years later, Sebastian's envy escalated. When I was 16 and he was 13, I was presented with a unique opportunity, a full sport scholarship to a university in the United States to play American football. It was my dream. I had trained relentlessly. My grades were excellent, and the scholarship was almost in my hands. Only the last documents were left to be sent. I left them in my backpack, ready to deliver them the next day. Sebastian again had access to my backpack. Days later, the university called me. The documents never arrived, the admissions officer said. The scholarship went to someone else. When I confronted Sebastian, he feigned ignorance. "Maybe you lost them, Marco," he said with a shrug. "You're absent-minded." My parents, frustrated but unable to prove anything, said it was just bad luck again. But I knew, with cold certainty, it was not bad luck. It was Sebastian. Desperate because of our constant rivalry, my parents took us to family therapy. They tried again and again, but Sebastian always refused to participate. He would sit with his arms crossed, mocking the therapist or diverting the conversation. "He's too good, too arrogant," Sebastian would say. I feel oppressed by his success. My parents, blind to his manipulation, saw him as a misunderstood, sensitive child. Their hope for a united family blinded them, preventing them from seeing the true root of the problem. It was exhausting and frustrating. I felt alone in my fight against an invisible force that only I seemed to recognize. Time passed, and despite Sebastian, I moved forward. At 23 years old, recently graduated in engineering with honors, life smiled at me. I received a job offer that was a dream come true, a junior engineer position at Constructor Global, one of the most influential mega construction companies internationally. The salary was exceptional, the benefits enviable, and the promise of leading innovative and ambitious projects filled me with indescribable emotion. I felt that all my years of effort, all those sleepless nights studying, had finally paid off. To celebrate, my parents organized a family dinner. The table was full of aunts, uncles, and cousins, all congratulating me. But Sebastian's gaze, sitting across from me, was like a dagger piercing through the joy. At that time, he was on his third attempt at a university career, accumulating debts and directionless. He had jumped from graphic design to administration and was now trying something related to digital marketing, but without showing any real interest in anything. In the middle of my thank you toast, Sebastian suddenly slammed his fist on the table. Enough, he shouted, his eyes bloodshot. It's always Marco, the perfect engineer, the favorite son. Can there not be a single moment in this family where he is not applauded? He stood up, his face red with fury. You're a sellout, Marco. You've crawled to get there, stealing opportunities that others deserve. You always trample on others to climb. Murmurs filled the room. My parents tried to calm him, embarrassed. Sebastian, please, my mother pleaded. But he was beside himself. No, I am sick of your hypocrisy. He's not as good as he seems. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard it shook the house. But before disappearing, he shot me a look full of pure hatred. You will not get away with this, Marco. I swear I will bring you down from that pedestal. The threat echoed in my head, but I dismissed it as another of his tantrums. How wrong I was. Days later, a week before my start date at Constructor Global, my world collapsed. I received a call from Human Resources. In a cold, formal voice, they informed me that my job offer had been rescinded. The reason, they said, is that we have received highly compromising materials that cast doubt on your integrity and suitability for the position. My heart stopped. They summoned me for a meeting. There, my lawyer, Lorenzo Reyes, a family friend whom I had already contacted as a precaution after Sebastian's threats, accompanied me. What they showed me left me breathless. Forged emails supposedly sent by me, full of racist, misogynistic, and demeaning comments about future colleagues and the company. Text messages implicating me in bribery and fraud during my university internships. And most disturbingly, manipulated voice recordings created with a rudimentary but effective AI that sounded exactly like me, where I supposedly boasted about plagiarizing projects and deceiving my professors. They were my most important projects, the ones that had gotten me the job. The evidence was overwhelming, the accusations devastating. My dream had vanished in an instant. I didn't need more than a second to connect the dots. Only Sebastian had intimate knowledge of my life, my projects, my university contacts, even the inflections of my voice to fabricate something like that. With a shattered soul, I confronted him in secret. I had set my phone to record, a precaution born from years of his subtle sabotages. I found him alone at home, slouched on the couch, eyes fixed on his phone. I walked in slowly and held out the rescission letter. What did you do, Sebastian? I asked him, my voice trembling. He glanced at the letter, then at me, with that same cynical smile that had irritated me since childhood. I don't know what you're talking about, little brother, he said, voice oozing false innocence. Maybe they finally discovered your tricks. I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding in my ears. Cut the act, I said coldly. I have the transcripts, the recordings, the emails, the details, only you could have known them. His smirk faded. Slowly, like a mask slipping off, his face twisted into something darker, a grimace of resentment, and beneath it, a flicker of satisfaction. Yes, he said, it was me. So what? You deserved it. I froze. You were always the golden boy, the untouchable, the perfect one. His voice began to rise, shaking with emotion. It was time for you to feel what it's like to fail. The hell I live every day, watching you succeed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My brother, my own blood. You can't have it all, Marco, he spat. Someone had to teach you a lesson. His words chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just envy. It wasn't even rivalry. It was pure, deliberate destruction. You're dead to me, Sebastian, I said, my voice barely audible. I don't want to see you ever again. He didn't reply, just stared at me, unflinching. I turned around and walked out of the family home. My parents tried to stop me, confused, begging for explanations, clinging to the hope that this was just another misunderstanding. But not this time. I left them there, stunned and powerless, like always. I took refuge at Leon's house, my best friend since high school. He didn't ask questions. He just gave me space. And I needed it, because it felt like my world had completely fallen apart. The years that followed that catastrophe were a personal hell. I had to start from scratch. With my name tarnished in the construction industry, I was untouchable to any serious firm. My resume, once pristine, was now a liability. I had to accept a low-level job at a local construction company. Far from the spotlight. Far from the ambition I once had. It was a slow and painful process. Every day felt like a battle to clear my reputation, to prove my worth, to rebuild the trust of those who now looked at me with quiet suspicion. It wasn't easy. There were moments when despair settled in so deeply I thought of walking away from everything I had once dreamed of. But I couldn't. Something inside me, maybe my pride or maybe my stubbornness, wouldn't allow me to quit. I had to prove that I wouldn't be broken. Little by little, With each small success, every project delivered on time, every task completed with precision and care, I began to climb again. My talent and work ethic began to speak louder than the rumors. Over time, I exceeded expectations, regained my footing, and, eventually, became a benchmark in the sector once more. During those years, I cut off all contact with Sebastian. It was not a decision made in anger or haste, it was survival. A red line, unbreakable. My parents, though saddened by the divide, eventually respected my choice. They stopped bringing him up. When I visited them, his name was a ghost that never passed anyone's lips. A necessary silence. Then, 6 years ago, just as my life was beginning to stabilize, Ivana appeared. She was like a ray of sunshine after years of storm. Radiant, optimistic, full of life. Her smile could lift an entire room, and her laugh was impossible not to join in with. From our very first date, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. On our third date, sitting across from her at a quiet little bistro lit with soft candles, I decided it was time to tell her everything. If she was going to be part of my life, she deserved to know the whole story. I reached for her hand across the table. "There's something I need to share with you," I said, my voice low, my heart heavy. She looked at me, attentive and kind. "Okay," she said softly. And I told her everything about Sebastian, the sabotage, the forged evidence, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. I told her how I'd rebuilt myself, but how that wound never really healed. "There's a line that I can't let anyone cross, Ivana," I said. "Sebastian is not part of my life. He never will be again." I paused, squeezing her hand gently. "I need you to understand something very clearly. He won't be at our wedding. It's not just a preference, it's a condition. His presence would ruin the happiest day of my life. I need your promise." She didn't hesitate. Her eyes met mine, full of empathy. She reached up and cupped my cheek. "Marco," she said tenderly, "I understand perfectly. That's a very deep wound. Your decision is yours, and I respect it. I will always be by your side." Relief washed over me. That moment meant more to me than I could ever explain. It was the support I had always wanted, the kind my parents had never truly been able to give. Her promise was seared into my heart like a vow. The first years of our relationship were idyllic. Ivana was my anchor, my partner in every sense of the word. She supported my projects, encouraged my dreams, and stood by me as we built a future together. 6 months ago, we got engaged. The wedding planning began an exciting whirlwind of lists, calls, and meetings with suppliers. Our shared calendar looked like a colorful patchwork of floral appointments and venue visits. But as the date approached, I began to feel a subtle change in Ivana. At first, they were just innocent comments. "Marco, don't you think time heals wounds?" Ivana would say gently, brushing her hand along my arm. "Maybe your brother has changed. Family is important, my love. It's the only thing you really have in the end." Each time, I stopped her cold. "Ivana, we already talked about this. Please, don't insist. It's a closed subject." She would nod, but I could see this flicker in her eyes, frustration she could no longer hide. She wasn't just asking anymore. She was hoping I'd bend, that I'd reconsider. Then came the pressure from my parents. Without telling me, they started calling Ivana. At first subtly, then less so. I only learned of it gradually through things Ivana would accidentally let slip. Comments that weren't hers, turns of phrase that sounded far too much like my mother or father. "Ivana," I imagined them saying in their well-meaning but insistent tone, "Sebastian has matured a lot. He is very sorry for what happened. Marco is so proud, so stubborn. You are the only one who can make him see reason. The family must unite." And Ivana, with her boundless idealism that family is everything philosophy, began to fall into their trap. She didn't know Sebastian, not the real him. She didn't understand what he was capable of, or how deeply he had wounded me. She only saw a fractured family and believed love could mend it. Then I began to notice things. Strange calls on her phone. Conversations that stopped the moment I walked into the room. She'd smile, put the phone down quickly, as if nothing had happened. When I asked who it was, she'd say just a vendor, or my cousin, always with that too light tone that made something tighten in my chest. Trust, that foundational pillar, began to show its first cracks. I tried to rationalize it. It must be the wedding stress, I told myself. She's tired. I'm tired. We're both overwhelmed. But some small voice deep inside me kept whispering, something is wrong. And then, last week, it all came to a head. We were sitting in the living room, the guest list spread across the coffee table like a battlefield. Names, numbers, scribbled notes, color-coded tabs. I had just come home from a long, exhausting day at the office, and the last thing I wanted was to revisit a wound I thought hoped was long closed. Ivana was sitting cross-legged on the couch, her laptop open, her phone in hand. "Marco," she said suddenly, her voice soft. "Sweet. Too sweet. Look at this." She turned her phone toward me. On the screen was a photo of Sebastian. His smile looked forced, too neat, like a mask. He was sitting at what seemed to be a work meeting, wearing a blazer, his hair neatly styled. "Look, honey," she said. "He's changed. He looks more mature, more settled. He's no longer that same, problematic child." I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. "Where did you get that photo, Ivana?" I asked quietly, my voice already tensing. "And what does it have to do with this?" She lowered her phone and met my eyes directly. Her voice had changed, no longer sweet, but firm, resolute. "I invited him," she said. "He's already on the guest list." The words fell like blocks of ice, shattering across the room. I stared at her, my mouth suddenly dry, my heart pounding. "What did you say?" I could barely articulate. My throat was closing, each word scraping against something raw inside me. I what? Ivana didn't flinch. She looked at me with the same calm determination she used when solving a logistical problem, as if this was just another detail to arrange. "I invited him to the wedding," she said, her voice low but steady. "I already talked to him. He's looking forward to coming. And if he doesn't come, I'm not going." Silence. My ears were ringing. My heart thundered in my chest like a war drum. "He is your brother, Marco," she continued, as though explaining something to a stubborn child. "You should be grateful that I care about your well-being and that of your family." I stared at her in disbelief, the edges of my vision narrowing. "I told you from day one, Ivana." My voice cracked, thick with emotion. "He is not welcome at my wedding. My sanctuary." The words cut into the air between us, each syllable trembling but sharp. "How could you do this? How could you betray me like this?" She stood abruptly. Her face hardened, frustration mingled with something else, a defiance I had never seen in her before. "I'm doing it for you, Marco," she said, almost pleading, "so that you can free yourself from that resentment. You can't live clinging to the past. Family is the only thing you have in the end. My parents asked me to, Marco. They believe it's the best for you, that this wound needs to heal." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "And my parents don't understand. They never understood what Sebastian did to me." I took a step forward. My voice dropped, but it burned. "And you, Ivana, you're not on my side." A deep ache welled in my chest, twisting into fury. "This is an unacceptable betrayal. Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, arms crossed tightly. "You're being selfish." I blinked. "You are punishing him for something that happened almost a decade ago," she continued, her tone rising. "Stop being a capricious child. You can't forgive your own blood. Sometimes you have to give in for the good of the family." "A capricious child?" I echoed, my voice sharpening into steel. I stood up, the chair screeching behind me. "Give in," I repeated, louder now. My voice no longer trembled, it resonated with an icy fury I could no longer suppress. "Do you know what it is like for your own brother to steal your life stream? For your name to be dragged through the mud by the envy of someone who is supposed to love you?" I saw the flicker in her eyes, the hesitation, the crack in her moral armor, but she said nothing. "That was not a youthful mistake, Ivana," I said, each word deliberate. "It was an act of premeditated cruelty. And you," my voice broke, "the person who swore to love me, to support me, you go and invite him behind my back." She shrugged, folding into an expression of obstinacy that chilled me. "Maybe he's matured. Maybe he wants to apologize. And maybe I don't care." I shot back, my voice laced with pain. "He made his decisions, and I made mine." I stared at her, feeling the sting of something irreparable growing between us. "I told you this was a red line for me, Ivana. I made it clear to you. I warned you." My voice, steady now, sounded almost foreign to my own ears, like I had crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't return. "If you cannot respect my limits, if you cannot trust my judgment on something so fundamental to my well-being," I said, feeling my chest tighten with each word, "then there is no wedding. There is nothing. There is no future for us." The silence that followed was dense, suffocating. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the hum of traffic outside, the sound of her breath catching. Ivana didn't move. She stood perfectly still, her arms slack at her sides, her eyes wide, disbelieving. I saw it then, the moment her world shifted. Her lips parted slightly. The tears welled without falling. "Are you serious about this?" she asked, voice low. "For this?" "Yes," I said, my voice tight and raw, the pain leaking through despite my effort to hold it back. "Because it's not just this." I stepped closer, not to intimidate, but because I needed her to see me. "It's trust, Ivana. Loyalty. You were supposed to be on my side. Did you know what this meant to me? What it cost me to overcome? And still, you decided to override my pain, my warnings, just to please a manipulator and my parents, who understand nothing." Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't speak. "I cannot marry someone who does not trust me, who does not respect my most sacred limits." The silence after that was overwhelming. I could feel my words hanging there, heavy and final, like a cold, unmovable stone. We stared at each other. A chasm had opened between us, and neither of us reached across it. Her eyes, now glassy, shimmered in the dim light of the living room. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she turned away. Without another word, she left the room, and I was left alone, with the guest list, with the names that now mocked me, blurred into meaningless shapes as my vision swam with grief and rage. The tiny printed lines seemed to curl under my gaze, fragile and pathetic compared to the enormity of what had just been broken. The days that followed were a blur of silence and stinging coldness. Ivana barely spoke to me, and when she did, her words were clipped, professional, as if I were a co-worker rather than her fiancé. That formality, that forced detachment, it wounded me more than any outburst could have. I kept telling myself, it will pass. She'll see. She'll understand. We've built too much together, 6 years of laughter, of holding each other through storms for it all to fall apart over this. But something in me knew. The crack in our trust, it ran deep. Maybe too deep. The wedding, once a beacon of joy, had twisted into something grotesque. Each passing day it loomed larger, a reminder not of union, but of betrayal. And then, one night, as I was dragging myself home from another long day at the office, mind swimming with exhaustion and too many unsaid thoughts, I saw Leon. He was leaning against the wall outside my apartment. His usual bright grin was gone, replaced with something harder, heavier. He looked up as I approached. "Marco," he said, his voice low and uncharacteristically somber. "We need to talk. There is something I have to tell you," Leon said, his voice tight with concern, "and you're not going to like it at all." My stomach clenched instantly, the kind of twist that comes before the worst kind of news. "What's wrong, Leon?" I asked. "Is it about the wedding, Ivana?" Leon nodded slowly, his expression somber. He gestured toward the sofa. "Yeah, it's about Ivana. And Sebastian." I sat down slowly, heart pounding. A cold dread began to spread through my chest. "A few weeks ago," Leon began, sitting beside me, "Ivana contacted me. Out of the blue. She said she wanted to talk about you." My fists clenched. "What do you mean about me?" "She asked about your problematic character," Leon said, using air quotes bitterly. "Your difficulty in forgiving. She said she was trying to understand why you were so rigid with your brother." A chill ran down my spine. "She wanted you to talk about me behind my back?" "Yes," Leon replied, his voice steady but heavy. "I told her the truth, Marco. I told her Sebastian hurt you badly, that your pain is real, that your reasons are valid." I felt a flicker of relief. At least he hadn't lied. But that flicker died as quickly as it came when he continued. "But the most serious thing," Leon said, dragging a hand through his hair, "is that she didn't only talk to me. She met with him." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, unable to speak. "Sebastian approached her," he went on, his jaw tight, "sold her a story. Said he'd changed. That he's in some big, promising real estate business. That he's doing well, turning things around." My mind was reeling. "He offered her an opportunity to invest," Leon said bitterly. "For her. For you. Said it would secure your future. Something about unity, redemption, all that garbage." I felt the blood drain from my face. My entire body went cold. Sebastian again. Manipulating. Lying. Using people's hopes like levers. And Ivana, God. Ivana, she believed him? "Not only did she invite the one person who ruined my life to my wedding," I said slowly, my voice hollow, "but she did it under the influence of a scam." Leon didn't speak. He didn't have to. Ivana's supposed good intentions were now stained by her own naivete, maybe even greed. I couldn't breathe. My disappointment congealed into a slow, bitter rage. Later that evening, when I heard the keys turn in the door, I was already standing, waiting. Ivana walked in with hesitant steps, her face pale. She looked at me, and I could see it. She knew. Leon had told me, and now she was here, waiting to be confronted. I didn't hesitate. "So," I said, voice sharp, "not only did you invite Sebastian, but you met with him behind my back." Her lips parted. I saw the tears begin to pool in her eyes, but I kept going. "And worse," I added, each word landing like stone, "you let him deceive you. With one of his shady deals. The same man who destroyed my life." "Marco, please," she said, breaking down, tears now freely falling. "Let me explain." I folded my arms, jaw clenched. "He sought me out," she said, voice trembling. "He told me he wanted to fix things. That he'd changed." I scoffed but said nothing. "He offered me a golden opportunity," she continued through sobs, "to invest in his project. He made it sound real, like something that could secure our future." I looked away, biting back the storm of emotions threatening to explode. "He convinced me," she went on, her voice breaking, "that inviting him to the wedding was proof that you had overcome your problems. And that I would prove my worth as your future wife. by uniting the family, by bringing prosperity. She sobbed. He asked me for money, Marco, Ivana said, barely able to meet my eyes. To secure the deal. He said it was an investment for both of us for our future. I stood motionless, stunned. My mouth went dry, the weight of her words pressing hard against my chest. This belief overwhelmed me, she said, her voice cracking. You gave money? I asked slowly, coldly. To a scammer? To my betrayer? After everything I told you? I was naive, she moaned, covering her face with trembling hands. I got carried away by the idea of a better future. And by your parents' words, they said Sebastian had changed. I couldn't speak. My heart was thudding like a hammer against my ribs. I believed, she continued, I believed that if he gave us money, if he helped us, he would be tied to us. And maybe then, you would forgive him. Forgive him? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen in a mixture of disbelief and quiet fury. She hesitated, then looked at me with an expression I'll never forget, somewhere between fear and shame. But the most devastating blow, she whispered, came later. I felt my whole body tense. He told me something else, Marco. He told me. She struggled to speak. He told me that you would never change. That you were an obstacle to my happiness. That if I wanted a successful life, I had to choose well. I closed my eyes. He said, she went on, barely audible now, that you were a drag. That you'd always be a loser, clinging to the past. The pain hit me so sharply I almost gasped. Sebastian wasn't just trying to manipulate Ivana with fake promises. He had tried to destroy me, to destroy us. To plant poison between us. And he had succeeded. In that moment, my choice was clear. I didn't feel doubt, just a numbing certainty. Ivana, I said, my voice firm, icy, stripped of warmth, you didn't just betray me. You didn't just ignore my limits. You let yourself be manipulated by a scammer and a traitor. You risked our financial future. For a lie. She shook her head, sobbing. Please, Marco. You demonstrated an alarming lack of judgment, I said flatly. There's nothing to save here. It's over. It's all over. She collapsed to her knees at my feet, begging, reaching for my hands with trembling fingers. Please, Marco, please, I was wrong. I'm so sorry, please, forgive me. But my heart, it was already shattered, scattered into 1,000 unrecognizable pieces. There was no way back. That night, the silence in the apartment was heavier than I'd ever known. No more arguments. No more tears. Just a vacuum. A piercing emptiness where a future used to be. Ivana's face was swollen with crying. Her hands shook as she folded the last of her clothes, placing them gently into the suitcase like she was folding away pieces of a life she'd broken. Her eyes searched mine, pleading, but mine no longer saw the same light. I'm so sorry, Marco, she whispered as she stepped across the threshold. I could only nod. No words left. The door closed behind her with a dull, final thud. And with her a part of me. The following days blurred together in a haze of phone calls, each one slicing into me like a dagger. I canceled everything. The wedding venue. The catering. The photographer. The florist. The band. One by one, I dismantled the dream, undoing what had once felt like the promise of a lifetime. There was something unbearable about it, like erasing a future I had written in ink. The sadness sat in me like a stone, lodged deep in my stomach. But even through the grief, there was clarity. A strange, cold certainty that I had done the right thing. I had lost my fiancée, but I had regained something I hadn't realized I was losing. My dignity. The reactions came quickly and in waves. Some comforting, others deeply unsettling. Leon, above all, was my anchor. After I told him everything, Sebastian's manipulation, Ivana's betrayal, his support was immediate and unwavering. You did the right thing, Marco, he said, sitting next to me on the sofa, his hand firm on my shoulder. She crossed all the lines. And Sebastian, that guy is a parasite. His words didn't erase the pain, but they steadied me. For a moment, I could breathe. Other friends weren't so sure. Some didn't fully grasp the depth of the betrayal. They offered their shoulder, their silence, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. Their discomfort. A few well-meaning but misplaced suggestions to maybe talk it out with Ivana. But Ivana's family? Their reactions were brutal. Her mother called me, her voice shaking with rage. You heartless monster. She screamed through the line. How could you destroy her like this? Over old grudges? You've ruined her life. I didn't respond. There was nothing I could say that she'd be willing to hear. Then came the message from her brother Raphael, not my partner, but Ivana's brother. Someone I had once called a friend. His text was long, venomous. You're a coward, Marco. Selfish. Cold. You made the biggest mistake of your life leaving Ivana. You'll regret this for the rest of your days. I stared at his words, numb. They didn't know. They didn't see. They didn't understand Sebastian's lies, his malice, or Ivana's blind naivety. Their loyalty to her made them willfully blind to everything else. And then there were my own parents, Don Alejandro and Dona Elena. Their calls were constant. Voicemails piled up. "Marco, please," my mother's voice pleaded. They came by the apartment. I opened the door to see their faces tired, lined with worry and frustration. "Marco, please reconsider," my father said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "She is your fiancée. And Sebastian, he's your brother. Family comes first, son," my mother added, clutching her hands to her chest. "You have to forgive." I stood there, arms crossed, my expression drawn and tired. "Sebastian is very sorry," my father continued. "I swear. And Ivana, how can you leave her like this?" I tried again to explain. I laid it out calmly, with all the exhausted patience I had left. "He scammed her," I said. "He tried to destroy my relationship from the inside. Do you understand what that means? He hasn't changed. He's still the same manipulative scumsucker who ruined." "Marco," my mother interrupted, shaking her head. "Your brother has his problems. We know. But you are the older one, the stronger one. You have to be the one to give in. Resentment is consuming you." Their words struck like hammers, hollow and loud. My parents stood there, staring at me with pleading eyes, completely blind to the rot that had taken hold of everything. Their blindness, no, their refusal to see was exasperating. They didn't understand. Or maybe they simply chose not to. To them, Sebastian was still the baby brother, misunderstood but redeemable. Ivana was still the sweet, smiling girl I had brought to Sunday dinners. And I was the problem, the one who wouldn't bend, the one who was too proud, too cold. They clung desperately to this idealized image of family, as though blood alone could excuse betrayal, as though love demanded that I offer up my dignity to keep the illusion alive. They looked at me with disappointment etched into their expressions, as if I were the one who had betrayed them, as if I were tearing the family apart. That hurt in ways I wasn't prepared for. It hurt just as much as Ivana's betrayal. And so I left. I walked out of that apartment, out of their reach, carrying the weight of my decision like a stone in my chest. I was alone, completely. And in that solitude, bitterness took root, slow, burning, constant. But so did something else. A strange, steady determination. Because I knew I couldn't give in. Not this time. Not after everything. The betrayal was too deep. The wound too raw. The days blurred into weeks. Life shrank to two things: work and silence. I buried myself in my career, took on projects I might have once avoided. Long nights with blueprints and calculations became my refuge. Engineering had always been my escape, a world of clean lines and logic. No betrayals there, no lies. But even as I filled my days, the emptiness remained. The void Ivana had left. The void Sebastian had created years ago and kept widening. And my parents didn't stop. They kept calling, kept pleading. "Please, Marco, he's your brother. Forgive him. Move on." Each time, I clenched my jaw and forced myself to listen. And each time, the anger returned like a tide. They couldn't see it. Wouldn't. In that whirlwind of emotion, I found myself turning to the only person who had ever truly seen our family. My grandmother, Dona Carmen. She had always been quiet, composed. A woman of few words, but words that mattered. Her eyes had the weight of generations in them, as if she saw through everything: the lies, the masks, even the pain we tried to hide. Her small country house greeted me with the familiar smell of herbs and coffee. The air was warm, comforting. She sat in her usual chair, a half-finished scarf in her gnarled hands. I sat beside her and began to speak. Everything poured out, years of silence, unspooled into words. I told her about Sebastian's sabotage of my scholarship, about Ivana, about the money, the manipulation, the betrayal, the silence of my parents. She said nothing while I spoke. She simply knitted, her eyes on the wool, her hands slow and deliberate. When I finished, the silence lingered. Then she sighed a deep, aching sound and set the needles aside. Her eyes met mine. "My son," she began, voice soft but dense with sorrow, "there is something your parents have never told you. Something that might help you understand, though not forgive, what Sebastian did." My heart clenched in my chest. "What are you talking about, Grandma?" She rose slowly, the effort etched in every motion of her aged frame. Without a word, she crossed the room to an old wooden chest tucked beneath the window. I watched in silence, the air around us thick with unspoken history. She lifted the lid with both hands, the hinges creaking in protest, and took out a worn metal box. From inside, she pulled a faded photo album and a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a thin piece of string. "Before Sebastian was born," she said, her voice barely audible, "your parents were expecting another child. A boy. They were going to name him Miguel." Miguel. The name sounded foreign in my ears, strange and unfamiliar, as if it belonged to a dream I'd never had. I sat down beside her, my mind blank. Miguel? I've never heard of any Miguel, I said, my voice tight with disbelief. She nodded slowly, opening the album to a page with a black and white photo of my mother, young, glowing, with a large belly, smiling softly at the camera. Elena was in her 8th month of pregnancy. Everything was going well. The pregnancy was perfect. Her fingers trembled as she turned the page and held up an old ultrasound image, faded but still legible. On the back, scrawled in my father's handwriting, Miguel. But then, she continued, tears welling in her eyes. Without explanation, she lost the baby. He was stillborn. She paused, the silence heavy, the truth settling in the space between us like dust. It was devastating, Marco. A terrible blow. Your parents were heartbroken, especially your mother. She thought her world was ending. I stared at the photo of my mother, young and full of hope, and tried to reconcile it with the woman who had stood in front of me days ago, pleading for Sebastian's forgiveness. Just a year later, my grandmother said, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, Elena got pregnant again, and Sebastian was born. She let out a deep sigh, her voice thick with weariness. From the moment he arrived, your parents spoiled him, overprotected him. They never set limits. For them, Sebastian was not just their son. He was their Miguel, the compensation for the loss, the fragile child they had to protect from all evil. She looked at me then, her gaze direct, unwavering. They believed that by giving him everything, by controlling his world, they could keep him safe from pain. But all they did was create a capricious, selfish child incapable of dealing with frustration, blind to his own actions. I swallowed hard, something tight closing around my chest. He was always the child who suffered, the one who needed more, to compensate for a tragedy he didn't even remember. And you, Marco, she said, turning fully to face me now, her eyes meeting mine, you were the strong son, the one with no emotional burdens, the one who didn't need protection. Her words hit me like cold water. That's why, when Sebastian attacked you when he lied, cheated, hurt you, they couldn't see it as malice. They saw it as jealousy. The wounded heart of a boy who felt inferior, who needed more love, more attention. They never wanted to tell you about Miguel. They thought they were protecting you from the pain of that loss. But in doing so, her voice broke for a moment. They denied you the understanding of why Sebastian was like that, and why they reacted the way they did. She placed the ultrasound gently on my knee. They left you alone, Marco. Alone against an enemy they themselves had created. An enemy that you, being the strong one, had to endure. I remained silent. Assimilating the truth was like swallowing a bitter pill, painful, but necessary. The hurt didn't lessen, not by any means. But the understanding, that was overwhelming. Miguel's revelation didn't excuse Sebastian's actions, not at all. But it gave context. It painted a clearer picture of why Sebastian behaved the way he did and why my parents turned a blind eye. They weren't just blind out of stubbornness, they were trapped in their own pain, their own denial. In their way, they were victims too. That night, as I lay awake in the silence of my apartment, the resentment inside me began to harden. It transformed from a raw, burning ache into a cold, calculated resolve. I realized I no longer wanted just to cut ties. I wanted justice. Justice that would do more than punish Sebastian quietly. I wanted the truth to be exposed, laid bare for everyone to see. I wanted to free myself, Ivana, even my parents, from the suffocating lie that had held our family captive for so long. The next morning, I reached out to Leon and Lorenzo Reyes. I explained everything I had learned, Miguel, the betrayal, the family's blindness. I said it clearly, I want Sebastian to pay for what he did. But not just in private. I want him to pay publicly. I want everyone to know who he really is. Leon nodded slowly, his face serious. Marco, I always knew Sebastian was a problem. But I have an idea. There's a very important real estate developer, Raphael, with whom I've been in contact. He knows your story, or at least part of it. What happened to you affected him indirectly. He has a huge project in mind and is looking for a partner like you. It could be your great opportunity to rise from the ashes. That same week, I met with Raphael. He was a shrewd businessman, probably around 50, with an impeccable reputation and an air of quiet confidence. He already knew about my talent and my misfortune. Marco, he said, looking me straight in the eyes, I know what happened to you. It's not fair. I'm about to launch a massive real estate project, the Master Project, an urban development that will change the city. I need an engineer of your caliber, someone with vision, with ethics. I offer you a partnership as a main partner. This will not only give you back what you lost, but catapult you to the top. And if you want, we'll give you the platform for your truth to be heard. His words struck a chord deep inside me. This was more than just a job offer, it was a second chance. A path toward justice. My phoenix rising from the ashes. I accepted without hesitation. The next 18 months were a whirlwind. I threw myself into the master project with everything I had. Days and nights blurred together, plans to draft, meetings to attend, supervision to oversee. The work was exhausting, relentless. But every brick laid, every structure erected, was a reaffirmation of my strength and resilience. Raphael turned out to be a formidable partner, brilliant, strategic, and wise enough to give me the freedom to innovate and the platform to truly shine. The master project exceeded every expectation. It wasn't just a development. It was a futuristic urban complex, a new icon of the city, a model of sustainable design and efficiency. The press didn't hold back. They dubbed me the visionary engineer. My name was everywhere: magazine covers, television programs, conferences. I had become a public figure, a benchmark in my field. While my star rose, Sebastian's fell deeper and deeper into ruin. Through Leon and some discreet contacts that Lorenzo Reyes maintained, I learned of his ongoing shady dealings, accumulating debts, small frauds, broken promises. His life was a disaster, spiraling into a constant downfall. Envy consumed him, fueled by seeing my face plastered all over the media. My parents, desperate for their lost son, tried to pull strings behind the scenes. They begged Sebastian to contact me, to ask for help. Their calls and messages to me were a strange mix of pleading and veiled threats, attempting to manipulate me into pulling him out of the hole he'd dug himself. I blocked his number. I ignored every attempt. I would not give him another chance to harm me. The Latin American Summit on Urban Innovation was the event of the year in our sector. I was honored with the keynote speaker slot to present the master project. That night, the grand auditorium was packed. Engineers, architects, investors, and the press filled every seat. Backstage, as I was being prepared, my phone rang. It was my mother, Donna Elena. Her voice was a quiet plea. "Marco, please allow Sebastian to attend. Your father got him a ticket. He's very sorry. He wants to see you succeed. It's an opportunity for reconciliation." Her insistence on family unity was exhausting. I refused outright. "No, Mom. I'm not ready for that." Still, beneath the refusal, a sharp pang of concern stabbed me. I knew what my parents were capable of under Sebastian's influence. Then, I stepped onto the stage. The bright glare of the spotlights dazzled me for a moment. Taking a deep breath, I seized the microphone and began my speech, focusing on the triumph of the master project. But then, as my eyes scanned the crowd, they landed on the front row. There was Sebastian. His smile was forced, his posture full of false superiority, as if he planned to steal my moment. Beside him, my parents wore anxious, hopeful expressions. And, to my surprise, Ivana sat a little further back. Ivana was watching me with a mixture of regret and a strange hope in her eyes. My heart skipped a beat. In that instant, anger and determination merged into something fierce and unyielding inside me. My carefully prepared speech about engineering, about the project's technical brilliance, vanished. I decided then to change it entirely. I stopped talking about buildings and blueprints. Instead, I spoke about foundations, not the concrete and steel kind, but the foundations of trust, loyalty, and respect in life. I talked about how envy can quietly eat away at those foundations from within, how betrayal, even from one's own blood, can bring down the most solid structure. With a calm, authoritative voice, but with a calculated coldness, I looked directly at Sebastian. Then my gaze shifted to my parents, and finally, to Ivana. "I have learned," I said slowly, "that sometimes to build something truly great, something that lasts, one must be willing to demolish what is rotten from the base. I have experienced firsthand how unbridled ambition and envy can lead someone, even someone who is supposed to be your family, to try to destroy your life, your reputation, your dreams." Murmurs filled the room, a low hum of surprise and tension. Sebastian's face turned pale. The forced smile dissolved, replaced by a grimace of terror. My parents squirmed uncomfortably in their seats, their faces flushed with shame and horror. Ivana covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. I told the story: the sabotage of my career, the forged emails, the manipulated voice recordings, the exact details of the incident that had cost me my dream job. I didn't mention names, but the way my family looked at me told me they understood exactly who I meant. When I finished, the auditorium fell into a tense silence. Then, Lorenzo Reyes, my lawyer, stepped onto the stage. With a discreet signal, Raphael accompanied him. The lawyer, holding a thick stack of documents, faced the press. "Mr. Marco has decided to make the truth public," he announced. "What you have just heard is not metaphorical. These are facts. We have irrefutable proof." He began handing out copies, recordings of Sebastian's confession, forged emails, forensic reports. To my surprise, there was also proof of the scam Sebastian had attempted with Ivana, including excerpts of conversations and bank transfers she had made to him. The silence shattered under the blitz of camera flashes. Suddenly, Sebastian exploded, shouting, "Lies. It is all lies. You are making all this up, Marco. You are defaming me in public." Sebastian suddenly jumped up, his face contorted with fury. He tried to lunge at me, but Leon and the event security were quick, almost instinctive in their reaction. They intercepted him before he could get close, struggling to remove him from the auditorium amid a swell of chaos. I stayed unperturbed on the stage, my voice steady and resonant, filled with authority and coldness as I addressed the press. "What you have just witnessed," I said, "is a small sample of what I have lived through. This is not defamation. It is the raw truth, and the evidence is here for all to see." The next morning, the scandal exploded across every platform imaginable. The story of Marco, the visionary engineer betrayed by his own brother, exposed so publicly at the summit, went viral. Newspaper headlines screamed the family drama. Television news segments dissected every detail, and social media buzzed relentlessly. Sebastian's reputation was utterly destroyed, his name now synonymous with envy and toxicity. Public justice was brutal and swift. My parents, Don Alejandro and Dona Elena, were dragged mercilessly into the eye of the storm. Shame consumed them. They had to face relentless questions from the press, from friends, and from society itself, which now pointed accusing fingers for their blindness and permissiveness with Sebastian. Every attempt they made to defend him only dug the hole deeper. In between tears, they were forced to admit the truth of Sebastian's actions. Amid the media frenzy, my grandmother Carmen, my wise, steady confidant, chose to speak out. She gave an exclusive interview to a national newspaper. With a calm and serene voice, she shared the story of Miguel, the lost brother, and how that tragedy had marked my parents and shaped Sebastian's personality. She explained how pain and guilt had blinded my parents, leading them to pamper Sebastian excessively, never setting limits for him. In doing so, they had indirectly created the monster of envy he had become. Her testimony added a layer of depth and tragedy to the story, generating compassion for my parents, but also a clearer understanding of the complex family dynamics that had harmed me. People were divided. Some lamented the tragedy, others condemned the parental blindness. Sebastian, for his part, vanished. The accusations of fraud and scam, the proof of manipulation involving Ivana, completely sank him. His business crumbled. His few remaining friends abandoned him. Authorities launched investigations. His future was bleak, filled with looming charges and a ruined reputation. He was no longer a problem for me. He was an outcast. A few weeks after the summit, I met with my parents. The atmosphere in the room was thick, heavy with unsaid truths and remorse. Their faces looked gaunt, their eyes red and swollen from sleepless nights and tears. My mother broke the silence first. "Marco," she said, "we are sorry. So sorry for Miguel. For Sebastian. For not having believed you. We were blind, son. Our pain blinded us." My father nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. "We failed you, Marco. We failed you terribly." I suddenly felt sorry for them. Their pain was real, and their shame was clear. But we were so far apart now, like a deep gap that no apology could fix. The trust and bond we had were broken too badly. I could forgive their hurt, but I couldn't forget how much their mistakes had cost me. Our family relationship, though no longer toxic, was marked now by a deep sadness and an insurmountable distance. Not long after, Ivana sought me out. She had been through her own hell. The public shame and the revelation of Sebastian's manipulation had hit her hard. Her face, once so full of light, now bore the marks of suffering. "Marco," she said, her eyes filled with tears, "I do not expect your forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I was naive, a fool. I let myself be manipulated by my own idealism and by Sebastian's lies. I risked your trust, your future. I do not deserve you." She showed me that she had invested in a new business, this time real and legal, to try to repair the mistake she had made. I did not ask for explanations. I simply listened in silence. I saw her repentance, her pain. I loved her, yes, or at least the memory of what we were. But the scar of betrayal, and above all the alarm at her lack of judgment, had broken something irreparably between us. I looked at her, my voice soft but firm. "Ivana, I forgive you. I forgive you for your naivety, for your good intentions, even for your mistakes. But the trust we had as a couple, the promise of a future together, that is broken. There are wounds that, once made, leave scars so deep that the tissue never returns to being the same. I'm sorry. We cannot rebuild what we had." Her tears fell freely as she nodded, accepting my decision with a resigned sadness. There were no shouts, no recriminations, only the painful acceptance of an end. Over time, the media whirlwind calmed down. The story of Marco, the engineer who rose from the ashes of betrayal, became a silent legend in the industry. People looked at me with respect, with admiration, and sometimes with a hint of pity. But for me, the most important thing was the peace I had finally found. A peace forged in the fire of adversity, in the painful demolition of what I once thought was my life, in order to build something truly solid. Sebastian sank into anonymity. The fraud investigations against him dragged on, his life becoming a bleak reflection of his own actions. Lonely, full of resentment and decay, there was no miraculous change for him, no redemption, only the cold consequences of a life consumed by envy and malice. He became nothing more than a shadow of what he could have been, a grim reminder of how bitterness can destroy a soul. My parents, Don Alejandro and Dona Elena, carried the weight of their shame and remorse like a heavy chain. Our relationship remained distant, marked by the guilt they bore and the sorrow for the fractured family they had failed to protect. Their calls became less frequent, our conversations superficial and careful. They had learned a very hard lesson, but the cost was the closeness they once had with their son. Ivana, for her part, went her own way. Through Leon, I heard that her new business was thriving. She had learned from her mistakes. She had matured. I was happy for her, sincerely happy, but our chapter was closed. She had found her own path, and I had found mine. My life, though different from what I had once imagined, was full. My engineering projects flourished, and my name became synonymous with innovation and trust. Leon, my faithful friend, remained my anchor and confidant. And my grandmother Carmen, with her wisdom and unconditional love, was the beacon that guided me through every storm. She had taught me that true family is not just about blood, but about loyalty, respect, and unconditional support. One day, I found myself alone on the terrace of the skyscraper we had built with the master project. The wind brushed gently against my face as I looked out over the vast city sprawling beneath me, a monument to resilience. I had demolished what was rotten, and on those ashes, I had built something bigger, something stronger. I reflected on the cost of truth, the pain of exposure, the loss of relationships that were once so important. Was all the suffering worth it to reach this freedom? This peace, was it truly peace? The answer wasn't simple. Some scars run so deep they become a permanent mark, a reminder of the path I took, the battles I fought, and the losses I endured. I realized my story wasn't just about betrayal or triumph. It was a testament to the complicated power of family love. Love that can lift you up, but also one that can blind you, hurt you, and almost destroy you from within. One afternoon, as I sat with Carmen on the terrace, I voiced what I'd been feeling. "Grandmother," I said quietly, "how do you make peace with all this? With the hurt, the betrayals, the loss?" She looked at me with those steady eyes, calm and full of understanding. "Marco, sometimes the greatest act of love, self-love, is knowing when to set boundaries, when to say enough, to protect yourself. And sometimes, to build a future, you must let go of the past that consumes you." Her words settled in my mind like a quiet truth. Life wasn't a fairy tale. There were no perfect endings, no magical fixes. It was a complex narrative, a tangle of decisions, consequences, pain, and healing. For me, that complexity meant tearing down what was rotten, rebuilding what could endure, and learning to live again. I looked out once more at the city below, the wind playing with the edges of my jacket. Despite everything, I had found something precious. My own version of peace, I whispered to myself. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.